Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today and what is obviously a momentous day in many ways, what's happening in Ukraine. There's lots of questions about what impact it will have on all of us around the world, particularly in perhaps things like energy bills and costs of fuel in other ways. Lots of questions around that, but obviously another big part of cost of living at the moment is energy bills happening right now and what's happening to energy bills over the next couple of months. So we're very pleased to have with us Matt Copeland. He's Head of Policy and Public Affairs at the charity National Energy Action. Thank you, Matt, for joining us today to answer hopefully lots of questions that you might have out there. So please get in contact with any questions you've got regarding what's happening with energy bills at the moment, and particularly what help that could be provided to you. That's bills are only seemingly heading one way at the moment and potentially for a lot longer. But there is help out there, and Matt can talk us through both the help that's been announced by the government and also perhaps help that's also available across the industry. So Matt, let's cut to the chase in terms of probably what the big question on people's lips at the moment is going to be today. They're seeing what's happening with Ukraine. They're possibly hearing about what's happening with wholesale prices, which have jumped today, as have oil prices. What do you think is going to happen to energy bills for customers in this country, particularly if they're already hearing that bills are going to go up in April?
Firstly, thanks for having me today. It's great to be able to speak to your readership about these issues. I think, unfortunately, with regards to energy prices, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine is likely to put upwards pressure on the wholesale price of gas. And upwards pressure on the wholesale price of gas means an increased price for electricity as well, because of the amount of gas we burn to make electricity. And it's likely that all of those increased prices, if that does manifest, will turn into higher energy bills domestically for households across the UK. And that will happen unless the government steps in and provides support for people. So unfortunately, it's likely that, and this is what I'm hearing from industry, if things do get worse with Russia and Ukraine, which they already have, the price of energy is more likely to increase than decrease, much more likely.
Right. I suppose the question is quite how much, will bills go up by and when? I know it's probably a very difficult question for you, but what would you say to someone who was asking you that at the moment, or asking the charity that?
I think the answer to how much bills will go up by is a very difficult one to answer. I think before, what we've seen in the last couple of days in Russia and Ukraine, the industry was saying that £100 or £200 increase further in October was very foreseeable.
Right.
Given what we've seen in the last couple of days, it wouldn't surprise me if it was higher than that. In terms of when, usually you would expect Ofgem to change the price cap on April the 1st and October the 1st every year, whether it's going up or down. But because of the tumultuous times we live in, with the wholesale price of gas being particularly volatile at the moment, and the impact that had on lots of suppliers over the last 6 months, with lots going out of business because of that volatile price, Ofgem has given itself the opportunity to change the price cap in the middle of that. So not on April 1st or October the 1st, potentially during the summer, if certain conditions are met, including conditions being sort of extreme and unforeseeable. What we're seeing at the moment in the East potentially will meet that criteria. I can't say for sure. That's a decision for Ofgem to make, but it could be that prices change again before October the 1st.
Right. Okay. So that's going to be quite, potentially concerning, isn't it? That we've perhaps got into the idea that this price cap. Should we just explain? So this price cap obviously affects the customers that are on default tariffs, standard tariffs. You might not necessarily know the name of your tariff, and also those with prepayment meters. I mean, how many customers, can you just remind us how many customers sort of are protected, if you like, by these price caps at the moment?
I think it's changing quite rapidly at the moment because the price cap is the best deal on the market, or tends to be the best deal on the market. So people who were on fixed deals are continually moving on to price cap deals. What I'm hearing, it's 20 plus million we're likely to be at.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's just a warning there that the longer this continues, the more possible it is that Ofgem, that basically they might alter this price cap, put it up. And you said summer, potentially sooner summer. So there could be another price rise. We don't want to sort of worry people unnecessarily because things might change, but there could be another price rise in the summer.
Yes, there could be.
Okay, all right. Well, that's some of the bad news perhaps potentially. But let's talk about what help is out there, because let's start with what the government has announced. Well, what the Chancellor announced. It was a few weeks ago now. So can you just remind us about what the Chancellor announced?
The Chancellor announced 3 things. The first 2 things relate essentially to council tax and support from local authorities. And the first of those is that every household that lives in a property or pays council tax on a property with a council tax banding of A, B, C, or D will receive a rebate on their council tax of £150. So that's pretty good. That is just money into people's pockets through that rebate. And what that means is that people will hopefully have more money to spend on other essentials in their life as well. There's a couple of things to know about that. One is that quite a lot of richer people will receive that rebate by virtue of some people who are more affluent living in those council tax bands, and some poorer people won't receive that. So the Resolution Foundation says more than 500,000 low-income households won't receive that by virtue of living in higher council tax bands, particularly in the north, in new housing in the north. That's the first one. Some people also won't receive that by virtue of already being exempt from council tax for various reasons. However, the Chancellor has provided councils with some discretionary funding so that they can help those people who miss out on that rebate. So if you don't receive that rebate, it's well worth contacting your council to see if there's other support available to you to help you out. And that can cover households who are in A to D, and I think other households as well who have a low income. So there is some extra support for those households that miss out, but we're not sure that covers everyone. The other thing that the Chancellor has done is he said that in October of this year, there will be a £200 rebate for everyone in Great Britain who has an electricity account with their supplier. So everyone's electricity account will get a £200 rebate, but that will have to be repaid essentially over a 5-year period. So this October, there'll be a rebate, and then on all electricity bills, there'll be an extra £40 added on for the next 5 years in order to recover that, so that it's overall sort of a zero cost to the Treasury, and it's spreading the cost over multiple years. I think that works for some people who would like to see those costs spread. But if costs get even higher after October going into next year, which seems like a possible thing at the moment, it's just compounding the issue in future years. So we don't think this is appropriate for the poorest households in particular, because we would never give households that we support a loan to cover their costs this winter. They have to repay back in future winters. So I think there's really there are mixed views about the rebate, the energy bill rebate in particular, and we think that's really quite inappropriate for the poorest households. We were overall disappointed there was no targeted support for the poorest households, and it was a broad-ranging sort of shallow support mechanisms that the Chancellor announced.
Okay, fine. Now, apart from that's the government, central government support, there are other schemes, aren't they? Then people might have heard of it, may not, but the warm home discount. This is something that, well, I mean, I've certainly been looking at this, and I've been given lots of advice about this over the years, actually. But there's this, forgive me if I'm wrong, I think it's £140, which is available for those that are eligible. But it's not quite that straightforward. I don't know if you sort of feel this as well. I've been looking into this for the paper and for online, and we found that it's only available for certain people, and only during certain windows. So depending on the supplier, it's not there all year round, as and when you need it. Do you want to just take us through A, whether you think it's a good thing, or B, whether you think it should be changed, and just take us through what it means?
So I think broadly we have supported the warm home discount over a number of years. It's not perfect, but it does provide support for a group of people that need it. The way it works is that it's a £140 rebate for about just over 2 million households at the moment. About half of those households get it automatically because they receive the guaranteed element of pension credit, and they're automatically data matched between the government and their suppliers, so they get it without applying for it. The other million rebates are sort of up for grabs from people who meet a broader criteria, but it's basically people who are in receipt of means tested benefits or people who have certain disabilities or health conditions. Those criteria can change from supplier to supplier, and you need to apply to your supplier in order to potentially access the rebate. The big problem is that about 3 million people could qualify for those 1 million other rebates. So if everyone applied for it who could get it, only 1 in 3 would receive it. And by definition, if they meet the criteria, they sort of need it. So it's a big deficiency in the whole funding of the scheme and the way it works. But I would urge people to look at their supplier's website to see if their application window is still open, because it might be, and see if they meet the criteria. The warm discount is actually going to change from April onwards. So for next winter, some parts of it are going to get a bit better. So it will go up to £150, which seems quite a small increase given what we're seeing in energy prices at the moment. That's what was consulted on last summer before all of this sort of blew up. So it's going to be £150, and it's going to be automatically given to almost 3 million households if the government follow through on what they consulted on last summer. And that's 3 million households who will be in receipt of means tested benefits automatically targeted through sort of DWP data. So people won't have to apply for it next year. So it gets better a bit next year, but the value gets much lower compared to the total energy bill.
Yeah, drop in the ocean, really, isn't it? Yeah. You talked about going on the suppliers' websites, and in fact, there is actually support out there. Perhaps is less known. I mean, I don't know if you've seen, but British Gas's owner Centrica has announced its results this morning. Big profits. That's a whole different story. But they've also announced an increase in a couple of the funds that that are there to help customers. Well, firstly, one that is directly for their customers. Sorry I don't know if you already know this, Matt, but there's something called the Winter Fuel Fund, which is there for if you've got debts of 250. I think it's between £250 and £750 with your energy debt. They've announced that the funding for that from March is going to double from 2 million to 4 million. So there's some support there if you're in debt with British Gas and you've and you want some help there. It's at least worth looking at whether you can get that help. And B, they've also announced they've got a separate fund which is available to customers actually of any company, which is they're putting 6 million into that. Matt, do you want to talk about are there those sorts of schemes that are available from other suppliers? Is it worth you contacting your supplier and saying, look, is there any help for me?
It's always worth contacting the supplier to see if there is help. And there's some things that all suppliers sort of have to offer as a matter of their supply license condition. So the main one is if you are repaying a debt to your supplier. So if you're in sort of a debt repayment and you have an amount you repay every week or month, your supplier has to set that rate dependent on your ability to pay it. And that means two things. It means that the way you pay it has to be reconciled with what you are able to do, whether it's by check or direct debit or through your benefits if you receive them. And the second one, much more importantly, is the amount that you repay has to be aligned with what you're actually able to pay. So it's always worth making sure that your debt repayments, if you are repaying a debt, are the right amount and you can afford them, because that is something that suppliers have to do by virtue of them just being able to operate in the market. So that's something they all have to do. Then there's also a lot of discretionary things that the suppliers do as well. So British Gas have the schemes that you talked about, but other suppliers have trusts as well, where they can help clear debts, energy debts, and to provide other support. And one part of the warm home discount that I didn't talk about a minute ago was a separate bit, which isn't to do with rebates. It's industry initiatives, and that's where suppliers have to or can elect to use some of their warm home discount funding to pay for things like energy advice and debt advice and benefits advice. So they may be able to point you towards those schemes as well if you ring your supplier. They're not able to take credit for it, so it's not something they can promote actively, but it is something they might be able to point you towards. So there's lots of things that suppliers can do, but there is this split between what they have to do and what they are doing sort of on a more discretionary basis.
Great, thanks for that, Matt. Just interject for a second because I don't know if I've got hailstones hammering on my window at the moment. I'm not sure what it's like where you are or where our listeners and viewers are around the country, but it's pretty wild out there. Anyway, please get in contact with your questions. Matt is here to answer everything and anything. We've just had a question coming on. As I read that, I'm just going to ask you one other one, which is a question that people may well have on what they should do. So they're seeing their bills go up. Big question we get asked a lot. I'm sure you do as well. Should I switch my supply? Should I look? Should I be? I'm on a standard tariff. Should I be looking for a fixed tariff at the moment?
But switching is a really difficult topic at the moment, and it's always difficult to sort of advise to a big group of people whether they should definitely switch or not, because everyone's circumstances are different from each other. What I would say is that what we're seeing the majority of the time is that the standard variable tariff, so the price capped tariffs, the protected tariffs, are more often than not the cheapest deals on the market. But a really good bit of advice that our advisors often give to our clients is that when you are comparing those deals, those fixed deals that are available to the standard variable tariff deals, it's really, really important not to compare the direct debit amounts that are being offered to you, because they might not be comparable in terms of the usage that's being input to them. The most useful thing to compare is the standing charge that's quoted and the unit rate that is quoted for both gas and electricity. Right. So if you can do that, then you can make a really good comparison between different tariffs. But most of the time at the moment, the standard variable tariff is the best one on the market.
That's really interesting, actually, because so people should be looking. The normal advice is to go onto a switching website, putting your estimated usage, etc., and it'll come up with a good sort of guide to how much you might be paying over the next year. But you're saying a better thing would be to look at the standing charge, which probably most people won't be aware is actually what it actually even covers. But what was your advice would be actually to look at what the individual tariffs are in terms of the standard charges that they.
So switching websites are usually pretty good, and they usually compare on the same basis of usage. But it's always worth checking, just so that one final check, what the actual tariff is doing, and not the monthly amount, not just the monthly amount. If you go onto the direct websites of different suppliers, they may assume different usage, so then that might be much more.
I see. Okay, so use that. Look, we just had a comment from really interesting feedback from Emma Davison. She said, I've just had my fourth increase in 6 months has just dropped into my inbox, and we've gone from £160 a month to them now wanting £382 a month. Apart from stopping using a fridge and cooking, not sure how we will be able to switch off anything else. I mean, that's such a insightful thing to feedback, because we often talk about this price cap going up in April, sort of ignores perhaps some of the increases that people are seeing in their direct debits already. That a lot of people, perhaps you can talk about sort of the sort of contacts you're having from people wanting help from you. What sort of increase in demand are you seeing on your services, for your advice?
Yeah, we have already seen a big increase in demand on the sort of advice that we do give to people. That's happened over the last year, really, because the price cap has increased twice in a row. So last April and the October that followed, and obviously there's going to be this big increase in price coming up as well. So much more people are struggling this winter than there were last winter, and we are getting problems, much like the things that the viewers today are talking about in the comments. One of them being that direct debits are increasing significantly multiple times. And what I would suggest in those circumstances is that you give a meter reading and make sure you check that you're not building up a big credit balance, and then have a negotiation with your supplier to make sure that your direct debit is actually right. And hopefully giving that meter reading will bring it down a good amount, because it shouldn't be rising multiple times without your energy use increasing, because energy price isn't actually increasing until the 1st of April. So that is one of the big things that's happening at the moment. The second one is just the amount of suppliers that went out of business. Every time a supplier goes out of business, that creates lots of problems, because the data gets switched over to a new supplier and some data is lost. Some credit balances don't feed through for a while. Debts don't feed through for a while. All of these things matter to people, and all of these things cause confusion. So we're seeing quite a big increase in demand at the moment, and we think it'll increase even further into the future as well.
Do you know what that issue about direct debits suddenly going up and suddenly seemingly, suppliers asked me to, for no real reason, seem to have gone through the roof, my direct debits. How much of a again, you've given some advice basically, which is that make sure that at least that direct debit is based on actual meter readings. Is it? Yeah. Is there anything else people can do? Because I mean, what can they turn around to your supplier and say, look, you want to whack it up from 100 and whatever it was, and I think from that person there, 160 to 100, 380. I just can't afford that. Can we negotiate something? Is that possible? Because for some people, those sort of increases are just unmanageable.
Completely agree. I think it's always worth having that conversation with your supplier, and I would say the most likely outcomes are either they will be able to negotiate with you and bring that direct debit down, or they'll be able to signpost you onto some help that can help you with your energy bills, whether it's improving the efficiency of your home or giving you some energy saving tips, or one of the other things that I spoke about earlier with energy or income advice or debt advice. So it's always worth that conversation in the first instance, and we'd always advise people their first port of call should be their supplier.
Okay, we've just got a few minutes left, so please get in touch with any other questions and comments you've got. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Just on the game, the sort of the I'm just going to read one actually. Brilliant timing, thank you, Anne. This is from Anne Lee. What about the pensioners who were in all day? We shouldn't have to stay in bed with our quilts on or apply for help. If you're on benefits, you should get help automatically, and not all pensioners have computers. So please stop telling us to use a website. That's a very good point, isn't it? I mean, it's a lot of people get rightly frustrated when they're told to go to a website. Where else can people go to get advice if they're not online, or presumably if they listen to this, obviously will be. What if they're not confident about going to websites? Where else can people get perhaps over the phone advice, maybe even face-to-face advice?
I think my first port of call will always be to say to go to your local Citizens Advice Bureau. So they're going to be a centre that they might not be able to help you directly, but they almost certainly will be able to point you in the right direction to an organisation that can help you. So we, for example, work with the Citizens Advice Bureaus, and they can feed into us so that we can help people on a more consistent basis. So that would be my first point of call. I would also say that NEA is working with all these organisations or suppliers and the government to make sure that people who don't use the internet can access this support. We know it's so important. Millions of people don't use the internet, and it really, really frustrates us when things are online only. So we are trying to work on it. But yeah, I would point people towards their system advice in the first instance.
Despite what we just said, actually, but there is obviously your own website, which
of course
is at the bottom of the screen there, nea.org.uk. If you can always go to a library if you want to get help accessing a website like that as well. There's normally other ways to access websites rather than just relying on perhaps having it in your own home. I've got another feedback here from Samantha. Thanks very much for getting in touch, Samantha. I've personally become so more careful with heating or eating. Very, very timely. I'm a single parent and personally don't trust others to and personally not trusting others to switch to. I can see what you mean, but considering changing over, but my mental health has become worse. I mean, that's how are you? I was going to ask you about the sort of kind of questions, the sort of areas of concern that you're seeing from those that get in contact with you. Are you seeing people who are saying that the concern about these bills going up and perhaps other bills going up is impacting their mental health?
Yeah, and I think we've always seen that. So we've always seen people struggling with their energy bills and having that choice between heating or eating, and it does have an impact on on mental health. Being cold on its own does have an impact on mental health, but facing the distress of those really horrible choices most definitely can severely impact people's mental health as well. So we absolutely see that every day, and the scale of it is just getting significantly worse at the moment with the increased prices.
I'm just thinking about that the early question just there about those that are on benefits. Are there any benefits? There's often a lot of benefits that people are maybe entitled to but don't automatically get, and perhaps they should be, getting in contact with DWP, looking at other potential forms of benefit that they could potentially get at the moment. I don't know, Matt, if that's an area that you can talk to us about, but again, so help that is potentially there that people could be eligible for, don't automatically get. What sort of help is out there, and how should they go about getting it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to fall short of my own standards that I set a minute ago here and point people towards websites. But the government website, the DWP website, has a good benefits checker to see if you are available you do qualify for certain benefits. It's often really useful to have someone advocating for you in the benefits system, and there's lots of services that provide benefits checks out there. So NEA can help with that, but there's lots of other services out there that can help guide you through that process, which can be really, really useful. One benefit that lots of people qualify for but don't receive is pension credit. So older people with a low income. If you think you do qualify for pension credit and you go, then it's well worth having a look at the criteria and seeing whether you do qualify, because I think millions of people across the UK qualify but don't receive it, and it's a lot of money, and it qualifies you for lots of other things to do with TV licenses, exemptions, warm home discount, and countless other things. So it's a bit of a passport benefit as well, pension credit.
Fantastic. Well, look, we got, just before we go, I'm just pausing as I read the comments. It's from Pauline Chapman. What about getting meters? Would that work out better? I think possibly, forgive me, Pauline, if I'm wrong, I think we might be talking about a smart meter. That sort of tackle what you were talking about earlier on about the estimated bills and direct debits going up when they don't reflect usage. Smart meters, have been controversial in some ways. Some people are saying that they don't affect usage as much as perhaps perhaps those that encouraging people to get them suggest. But what's your view on smart meters? Is that way of ensuring that you don't pay more than you should?
Yeah, we really support smart meters.
Smart
meters ensure that you don't have to give a meter reading. It's sort of automatic, and your supplier knows what you're using all the time. So your direct debit should be the right amount for your usage. So that's a really good thing in the context of what we've been speaking about before. But also, if you are using a prepayment meter, a legacy old prepayment meter where you have sort of coins or tokens that you need to use to top up, we found that people who transfer to smart prepayment have a significantly better experience in that they don't have to go to the shop to top up. They can do it remotely from home. They can access a wider variety of tariffs because they're not stuck to one supplier. All sorts of things that people really, really like. And especially at the moment with, I know the legal requirements coming to an end, but people will be expected to self-isolate or self-isolate or choosing to self-isolate. Not having to leave the house if you have COVID is quite a big benefit as well. So I'd say particularly if you use a prepayment meter at the moment, think about getting a smart meter, because it can be a game changer in terms of how you experience energy.
Okay, well, I'm going to run over time here because there's a couple of things on smart meters I think people might well have as a finish on this, which we could have a whole session on smart meters, I'm sure. But just as a couple of things that come to mind, can anyone request a smart meter if you've got one? Do you have to pay? Well, 3 questions actually. Can anyone request a smart meter? Do you have to pay anything up front for it? And if you change supplier, does that does that affect you in terms of if you want to switch supplier? Sorry, 3 right at the end for you.
So anyone can request one. The lead-in time for getting one might vary between suppliers, but you can always, you might not be able to book an appointment straight away, but you can definitely put your name down to have one, and you'll be contacted when an appointment's available. Secondly, it won't cost you anything up front. The smart meter rollout is paid through our energy bills over a longer time, so there's no upfront costs for your smart meter. And thirdly, a new smart meter installed today will allow you to change supplier. For the most part at the moment, an older smart meter will also let you change supplier. There's a limited amount that are still in the old mode, less smart mode, which don't let you change supplier, but they will all be upgraded through sort of radio transmissions, over-the-air transmissions, to allow them to have that functionality. So in the next year or so, I think all smart meters will have that functionality to allow you to work with any supplier. So hopefully they're the sort of positive answers to all of those questions.
Great. Okay. Well, let's, on a day when there's lots of negatives around, let's finish on at least that positive. There's great. Thank you very much, Matt. There's been some fantastic advice in there, and please get in touch with us here at the Mirror, and we'll try and answer any other queries. If I can't answer them, which possibly, I'm very likely won't, I'll be able to pass them on to Matt, and we'll hopefully get some answers from them if you didn't have time to ask during this session. For the meantime, thank you very much, Matt, and great to talk to you.
Thanks, Graham.
Okay, thanks everyone.